Derek Malone wasn't just another quiet homeowner in Belridge Oaks. With his clean-cut appearance, neatly kept lawn, and soft-spoken manner, he blended right into the community. No one suspected he spent years working under a federal animal welfare division, quietly investigating cruelty cases that never made the news. All he wanted now was a little pissant for Max, his orange tabby, to enjoy his golden years, curled up on their back patio under the lemon tree. But the HOA had other plans. It started with a letter taped to his door. No envelope, no signature, just bold black ink on a white page. No pets allowed per HOA by remove immediately or face penalties. Derek blinked, rereading it twice. He'd done his research before moving in. Therapy animals with federal registration were permitted, and Max was certified. The paperwork had already been sent to the HOA board months ago, signed and acknowledged, so why now? That afternoon, he walked down to the HOA office, letter in hand. Karen Elbridge, the vice president of the board, greeted him with a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I trust you got the note?" she asked, hands folded like she'd rehearsed it. Derek replied calmly, "Max is federally registered. You have the forms on file." Karen's lips barely moved. "This isn't a debate. We're tightening standards." He could have argued. He could have brought up legal protections. But something about her tone, too smug, too sure, stopped him. Derek nodded slowly and left. That night, Max didn't eat his usual dinner. By morning, he was vomiting. His tail trembled when Derek picked him up. The vet ran tests and pulled Derek aside in private. "There's a chemical in his system. It matches something commonly found in pesticides granules, usually hidden in food." Derek froze. Back home, he rechecked everything. No spills, no open bags. But then on the edge of the patio, next to Max's empty bowl, he saw it. A crumpled tin of tuna, not one he'd bought. It had no label, just a few oily flakes left inside, and a faint, unnatural shimmer under the porch light. His heart dropped. He reviewed his doorbell cam. At 4:12 a.m., a figure stepped into the corner of Usaman with a hoodie and gloves. The image wasn't crystal clear, but he saw the faint outline of short, styled hair, and a familiar walk. Karen. Derek paused the video. He could report, and now, but something inside told him to wait. He had a better idea. With Max resting quietly, Derek spent the next hour mapping out his plan. He ordered 2 motion-activated trail cameras from a local shop and installed them in the bushes, angled toward the side yard. A second bowl identical to Max's vase placed as bait. Then he sat inside with a journal open, labeling the page, HOA Incident, Operation Clawback. For the next 2 days, he acted normal, watered his plants, smiled at neighbors, walked Max carefully along the back of the property. Karen waved at him from across the street with the smirk of someone who thought she'd won. But on the third night, just past 3:45 a.m., the camera caught something. A shadow passed between the lemon tree and the fence. The figure knelt, reached into a pocket, slid something into the dish. Derek's hands tightened into fists as he clicked through the footage. He zoomed, adjusted the contrast. Karen not just on his property but tampering with food. Still, he didn't call the police. He wanted more. As Max began to recover, still groggy, but eating again, Derek pulled on gloves and collected the bait dish carefully into a sealed bag. Then he took the unopened can from the trail camera night and placed it in his cooler next to labeled vials. He made one phone call, not to the HOA, not to local law enforcement, but to his old contact at the agency. And while Derek waited for the reply, he pulled out the HOA handbook and started highlighting something he never thought he'd need, the section on personal liability of board members during legal investigations, because what was coming for Karen, it wasn't a citation. It was federal. By the time the sun came up the next morning, Derek had already been awake for hours. Max was curled in a blanket cocoon beside him, breathing slow but shallow. The little guy was trying. He always had a quiet strength about him, but the poison had done damage, and Derek knew it. Karen hadn't just crossed the line. She had buried it, stomped on it, and spray-painted HOA authority across it. Derek reviewed the trail camera footage again, frame by frame. The time stump, the motion detection pings. Karen's silhouette bending near the bowl, her wrist flicking just slightly as she emptied the can, then her quiet retreat between the shadows. It was enough to raise alarm, but not yet enough to nail her. And Derek knew better than anyone. Cases like this fall apart when rushed. He'd spent years watching evidence get thrown out over one missed step or a blurry image. He wasn't going to lose this, so he expanded the setup by midday. He had 3 more cameras installed, one hidden in the flower box on the porch, one tucked into the birdhouse on the back fence, and another inside a fake sprinkler head he'd picked up from an old investigation kit. He added UV powder to the outside of the new bait can and the rim of the dish. Harmless, invisible to the naked eye, but unmistakable under blacklight. Anyone who touched it would glow like a neon ghost. That evening, as Max drifted to sleep beside the heater, Derek made notes in a new logbook. Each entry was timed, observations documented. He printed off copies of Karen's previous notices, highlighting the language non-compliant, subject to fines, refusal to obey. It all painted a picture, one that would soon matter. And then, something unexpected happened. Around 7 p.m., just as Derek stepped outside to collect the evening camera data, a white SUV pulled up slowly across the street. It wasn't one of the usual HOA board members. The vehicle was newer, out of place, and tinted. A man stepped out mid-50s, dressed business casual, carrying a leather portfolio. He walked straight toward Karen's door. Derek watched carefully from behind his lemon tree. Karen opened the door. She didn't look pleased. After a brief exchange, too quiet to hear, the man handed her a folder. She waved him off, annoyed. He got back in the SUV and left without a glance. Derek waited until nightfall to check the cameras. 3:28 a.m. movement detected. This time, Karen didn't even try to hide her face. No hoodie, no gloves. She walked straight up to the bowl, glanced around quickly, and did the same wrist flick. She reached into her purse, pulled out what looked like another can, and dumped it into the dish. But as she walked away, Derek noticed something new. Her hand brushed against the planter box, the same one with the UV powder. Back inside, Derek didn't hesitate. He flipped on the blacklight flashlight and opened a folder he'd labeled Karen Contact Surface. Her fingerprints lit up in glowing streaks on the sample dish. The fake bait can, even the handle of the gate. That wasn't suspicion anymore. That was proof. But Derek still didn't report her. He sent a message instead to his former handler, now a field supervisor in an adjacent region. Active case forming. HOA VP involved. Suspected poisoning of federally registered therapy animal. Surveillance secured. Physical evidence obtained. Requesting escalation and forensic lab pull. An hour later, the reply came. We're watching. Do not engage further. Let her walk herself in. Derek leaned back in his chair. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about principle. Max was more than a pet. He was a registered therapy animal placed with Derek after a high-stress incident in his final undercover operation. For someone like Karen to try and erase that bond under the banner of community enforcement, that needed consequences. But even Derek wasn't ready for what came next, because just after sunset, he got a knock on the door. It wasn't the police. It wasn't the HOA. It was a boy, maybe 10, nervous, holding something in his hand, a small silver tuna can with no label. His voice barely rose above a whisper. Miss Karen said to throw this in your yard when no one was looking. Well, I don't want to. Derek slowly took the can from his hand, heart pounding. He asked one question. Did she ask you to do this before? The boy hesitated, then nodded. Once, twice, maybe more. The boy's hand trembled as he passed Derek the can. Derek knelt to meet his eyes, calm but serious. You did the right thing, he said gently. You're not in trouble, but I do need to know. Did she ever say why? The boy looked at his sneakers, then muttered. She said it was for the neighborhood, that pets were dangerous, that you were a problem. Derek exhaled slowly. He thanked the kid, wrote down his parents' address, and sent him home with a granola bar from the pantry, just enough to make the kid feel like a helper. Not a pawn. Back inside, Derek labeled the new can Incident 3C, minor delivery, and sealed it in an evidence bag. 3 cans, 4 nights, 2 cameras, UV traces, and now child involvement. Karen wasn't just breaking rules, she was escalating. He opened the HOA charter again. The more he read, the more absurd it became. Karen had helped author sections of the rulebook that gave the board sweeping discretion. Vague language, loopholes, phrases like community safety and aesthetics enforcement. No checks, no balance. And that's when Derek saw it. Tucked at the bottom of the enforcement section was a clause titled Private Enforcement Initiatives. It allowed board officers, especially the vice president, to personally intervene in minor disputes where immediate action is deemed beneficial. It wasn't law. It wasn't even ethical, but in Karen's hands, it had become her license to do whatever she pleased, and no one had stopped her. Until now. Dart printed out the clause and stapled it to a letter. No emotion, no threats, just a notice of his federal registration, a citation of animal therapy, protections under federal code, and a copy of Max's certification. He left the letter in Karen's mailbox, time-stamped, and witnessed by his door camera. He didn't expect a response, but she delivered one anyway. That evening, the neighborhood group chat buzzed. Karen had posted a scathing message. Certain homeowners are abusing mental health exemptions to keep animals in our peaceful community. This is unfair to the rest of us. We cannot let bad behavior slide because someone claims to have credentials. She didn't mention Derek by name. She didn't have to. 2 hours later, a fresh HOA citation showed up, taped to his front door, this time for unauthorized outdoor food that may attract pests. The bait dish. Derek smiled without humor. The game was no longer just about Max. It was about control. But Karen had just made a critical mistake. She'd turned paperwork into ammunition, and Derek knew how to fire back. He drafted a reply citing the Federal Fair Housing Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and a recent court ruling involving HOA discrimination against therapy animals. He attached a brief memo to the HOA board, explaining that any further harassment would be met with a formal complaint to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. But he didn't send it yet. He waited for the next board meeting at 6:59 p.m. Derek walked into the HOA clubhouse with Max in a soft carrier at his side, drawing quiet stares. Karen sat at the head table, fanning herself like the room was beneath her. 4 other board members were present, their expressions unreadable. Derek spoke during opencomments.com/precise. He laid out the evidence without accusing. He read the laws. He showed Max's certification. Then, without warning, he pulled a small blacklight flashlight from his pocket. I've also documented evidence of tampering, he said quietly, turning toward the projector screen. He clicked the flashlight on. A photo popped up, Karen's fingerprints glowing on the bait, bowl, and gate handle. The room went still. One board member, a younger woman named Brielle, leaned forward. Wait, is that real? Derek nodded. Tested with a non-toxic UV powder. It only shows up under this light. Applied to my property without consent. Karen's face turned crimson. That's ridiculous. You could have planted that. This is harassment. But Derek didn't flinch. He played a silent video from the trail cam. Karen, entering his yard, reaching into the purse, dropping the can, walking away. No hoodie, no disguise. Just Karen. Another board member stood abruptly and left the room. Brielle turned to Karen slowly. We'll need to review this. Karen scoffed and stormed out, heels clicking like gunshots across the tile. But the twist came an hour later. Back at home, Derek opened his mailbox. Inside was a plain envelope. No return address, just a single sheet of paper, typed in bold. She's done this before, not just to you, but she covered it up. If you're really from the feds, look at March 2021, HOA lot number 12. Check the vet's report. Derek sat at his kitchen table, staring at the envelope like it had a pulse. She's done this before, not just to you, but she covered it up. If you're really from the feds, look at March 2021, HOA lot number 12. Check the vet's report. He flipped it over. No return address, no clue who sent it, but that date stuck with him. March 2021, lot #12. He fired up his laptop, logging into the county's property database. Lot number 12 belonged to an older couple, the Jensens. Quiet, private, no kids. Their yard had always been neat, and their porch full of hummingbird feeders. But something about the house had changed a while back. No more garden gnomes. No more wind chimes. He checked veterinary records next. Since he still had some access to federal resources, Derek requested archived logs from the local emergency vet, citing his active investigation status. Within hours, the files arrived. March 14, 2021, emergency visit. Animal Labrador Retriever, 4 years old. Symptoms, severe vomiting, seizures, vet's notes, suspected poisoning. Owner declined to pursue legal action. Animal euthanized. His breath caught in his throat. The vet's report included handwritten notes. Owner hesitant, mentioned neighborhood conflict with HOA, said something about retaliation but didn't want trouble. The signature on the intake form, Christine Jensen. Lot #12. Derek, single quotes, has hands clenched. This wasn't just about Max anymore. Karen had a pattern, and no one had stopped her. He shut the laptop, grabbed a manila folder of printed evidence, and stepped out into the night. The next morning, he knocked on the Jensen's door. Christine opened it slowly, suspicious at first. But when Derek introduced himself and mentioned Max, her eyes softened. I remember your cat, she said. Little orange guy, real gentle. He nodded. Can I ask you something, off the record? She hesitated, then stepped aside. Come. In the Jensen home was quiet, still full of small dog toys left untouched. A photo of their lab Tucker sat on the mantel. Derek gently opened the conversation, sharing what had happened to Max and the recent discoveries. When he brought up the March 2021 vet report, Christine sat down heavily. We didn't have proof, but we knew, she whispered. He never left the yard. And the day before it happened, I got into it with Karen about some garden flags. She called them unpatriotic. Derek leaned in. Did you tell the board? Christine shook her head. They brushed it off. Said we couldn't prove it. Told us not to stir division. We let it go. Her voice cracked. But you shouldn't, Derek said gently. She looked up, something hardening in her expression. What are you going to do? He held up the folder. Everything I can. That night, at the continuation of the HOA board meeting, the room felt different. Karen wasn't seated at the head this time. She stood off to the side, arms crossed. Brielle had assumed the seat. The air buzzed with quiet murmurs. Derek took the floor again, this time not with suspicion but with a timeline. He laid out the poisoning of Max, the UV evidence, the video surveillance, the delivery through a minor, and finally, the case of Tucker Jensen. Christine had agreed to let him share it. When Derek held up the vet's report, silence fell over the room. He turned to face Karen directly. One dog, dead. One therapy cat, poisoned. Multiple reports, ignored. And the same signature on both citations. Yours. Karen finally snapped. You have no proof. You're just trying to destroy my reputation because you don't like rules. Derek didn't respond. He simply clicked his remote one more time. A new video appeared from the last night's camera. Karen's hand, reaching through the fence, her bracelet visible now as a match to a photo from her public social profile. One board member gasped. Another muttered, "Oh my God." Karen stepped back. "This is slander. I'll sue every single one of you." But her voice had lost its power. Brielle turned to the rest of the board. "We'll convene privately. This needs immediate review." The meeting ended in disarray. Neighbors left whispering. Karen stormed out again, this time alone. But when Derek returned home, he found something taped to his garage door, a single sheet of paper, handwritten, double quotes, "You think you're safe because of your badge, but badges can disappear." And below each, a smear of something oily. Max's food bowl had been kicked across the driveway. Derek stared at the oily smear on his garage door. It reeked of spoiled tuna and petty vengeance. But what struck him harder was the note's short, shaky handwriting, likely scrawled in anger and haste. "You think you're safe because of your badge, but badges can disappear." This wasn't just defiance anymore. It was intimidation, and it wasn't subtle. Max, still recovering, paced restlessly by the door that night. Every sound outside made him twitch. Derek couldn't sleep. He checked the cameras twice, set up 2 more. At 3:14 a.m., the back camera caught movement. Someone had walked behind the fence line again. This time, nothing was placed in the bowl, but something was taken. Max's favorite chew toy, a soft blue mouse, was gone. That was enough. Derek didn't waste time. By 8 a.m., he was on the phone with Agent Laramie, a quiet, no-nonsense federal enforcer who'd supervised Derek years ago during a covert cruelty ring bust in Arizona. "She's threatening you directly." Laramie's voice was calm but laced with steel. "Yes," Derek said, "and using HOA policy to shield her. She's crossed into criminal trespass, harassment, and there's evidence of poisoning. Plus, there's a pattern. The Jensen case. And now she's using kids." There was silence on the line for a beat. "I'll send someone local to look into the board records. Quietly, and I'm notifying USDA enforcement. If she left chemical traces on that toy, we'll match it." Derek looked at Max, curled tight beside the sofa. "Thank you. You know the drill," Laramie replied. "No confrontation. Let her dig." That afternoon, things got stranger. HOA newsletter, normally a dry PDF full of lawn trimming tips, arrived in mailboxes with a front-page feature titled, "Abuse of Authority. When Badge Carriers Break Community Trust." The article didn't name Derek, but it quoted an unnamed whistleblower warning about a homeowner using federal resources to intimidate neighbors. Neighbors began glancing at Derek differently, less with suspicion, more with confusion and fear. Karen had found a new tactic: disinformation. He scanned the article for a byline. It was signed, K. Elbridge, HOA Vice President. Despite everything, despite board members pulling away, Karen was doubling down. That night, the knock on Derek's door wasn't a threat. It was Brielle, the young board member who had taken over leading the meetings. She stood awkwardly on his porch, holding a USB drive and looking over her shoulder like someone was watching. "I shouldn't even be here," she whispered, "but you need to see this." He led her inside over a glass of water. Brielle admitted she'd been digging through past HOA records at his unspoken urging. She'd found something odd. "There are files missing," she said. "Entire blocks of complaints. Anything involving animals, really. But this was still in the archive." She plugged in the USB. On screen appeared a scanned document on HOA violation from a year ago. Address lot #19. Pet owner, Raina Delcroft, violation. Unauthorized dog activity. Raina's name rang a bell. She was the widow who'd moved out in a hurry last fall. Derek hadn't thought much of it, just another family downsizing after a rough year. But Brielle pointed to the note at the bottom of the page. Multiple reports of disruptive animal. Final warning issued by Vice President. Follow-up contact, handled personally. Derek leaned in. "What happened to the dog?" Brielle's voice went flat. "Raina said it ran away. But after reading the Jensen case, I'm not so sure." The pattern wasn't just forming, it was hardening into a line. Karen had crossed again and again. Dogs, cats, vague complaints, followed by mysterious disappearances or sudden illness, and always handled personally. Derek tapped the table. "I need that original file." Brielle nodded. "I can get it. But if she finds out," "She won't," Derek said. "She's too busy watching me." As if on cue, Derek's phone buzzed. A motion alert from the front camera. He pulled it up, hand froze. Karen stood at the edge of his lawn, holding Max's blue mouse toy. Just holding it, staring at the house. After a few seconds, she placed the toy on the sidewalk, deliberately, slowly, then walked away. Without saying a word, the blue mouse toy sat motionless on the sidewalk like a taunt wrapped in felt. Derek didn't touch it. He photographed it, logged the time, and bagged it using gloves before sealing it alongside the earlier evidence. This wasn't just psychological warfare, it was a signature, and Karen had just signed it in bold. The next morning, Agent Laramie's contact arrived. Agent Voss, dressed in plain clothes, with a nondescript sedan, stepped into Derek's kitchen, like he'd been there a dozen times before. He didn't ask how Max was doing, he already knew. He went straight to work. examining the evidence Derek had gathered. She's gotten sloppy, Voss said, flipping through UV photos and the security stills. Probably because she's used to no one pushing back. Derek nodded. That changes now. Voss set down the folder and looked Derek in the eye. We're not here to arrest her yet, but if there's anything illegal on her property, especially related to animal poisoning, we can move fast. Derek knew the rules. To get inside Karen's garage, they needed either consent or probable cause, and the latter required one more thread to pull, and Derek had one. The boy, the one Karen had tried to recruit to toss the poisoned can into his yard. He lived just 3 houses down, and with his mother's reluctant blessing, Derek and Voss paid them a quiet visit. The mother, wary but clearly upset, allowed her son to speak this time more openly. She told me to get it into his yard without being seen. The boy said it was just trash, but her eyes were weird, like she was mad. The real hook came next. She keeps pet stuff in her garage, but she doesn't have pets. There's a box with little cans and bottles. They smell really bad. Voss looked at Derek. That's probable cause. By the time Karen got home that evening, the warrant was already secured. 2 sheriff deputies arrived with Voss at exactly 6:43 p.m. Derek watched from across the street with arms crossed as Karen stepped out of her SUV and immediately launched into a tantrum. You can't just barge onto my property. I'm a vice president of this community. Voss didn't raise his voice. We have a signed warrant. You're welcome to observe, but interfering will be noted. Karen's face twisted. This is harassment. It's because of that man and his diseased cat. But it was too late. The garage door creaked open. Inside, the truth spilled out like a rotted secret. Shelves lined with open tuna cans. Dozens of them, some with residue, others half-filled. Labeled bottles with worn chemical stickers. Garden gloves with a strange yellow crust on the fingers. An old cooler containing what looked like frozen meat, none of it labeled, none of it identifiable. And in the corner, a locked cabinet. The deputies forced it open. Inside were 3 pet collars. One was bright pink. Faded, the tag read, Tucker. Derek's breath caught. Christine Jensen's dog. Voss photographed everything, logging it into chain of custody. Protocol. Karen Palnell stood behind the deputies, mumbling, You don't understand. They were making the neighborhood worse. They were ruining the peace. Voss turned. You're under investigation for multiple counts of suspected animal cruelty, use of harmful substances without permit, and criminal trespass. Don't say another word without counsel. Karen's jaw dropped. But I'm on the board. You're not above the law. The fallout was immediate. That night, the HOA chat lit up like a brush fire. Neighbors were asking questions, demanding answers. Brielle confirmed what she could. Karen was suspended from all HOA duties pending investigation. But for Derek, the war wasn't over, because the next morning, tucked into his mailbox, was a photograph, not of Max, not of Karen. It was a picture of him taken from across the street, through his front window. No note, no sender, just a warning. Someone else was watching. The photo in Derek's mailbox changed everything. Not because it was a threat, he was used to threats, but because it wasn't Karen's style. She was loud, vindictive, sloppy. This was something else. Cold, calculated. The photo had been taken from a distance, perfectly framed, and slipped into his mailbox without triggering any of his cameras, which meant someone else was out there. Someone who didn't want Karen exposed. Or Derek protected. Agent Voss reviewed the photo carefully. Long lens, professional angle. That's not HOA rage, that's surveillance. Derek tightened his grip on the table. Why now? Because Karen's not acting alone, Voss replied, and whoever was helping her just got nervous. The next day, Karen was officially charged with animal cruelty, criminal trespassing, and tampering with evidence. Her lawyer tried to spin it as overzealous neighborhood protection, but the photos, chemicals, and the pink collar with Tucker's name on it were damning. Still, the story wasn't over, because Voss's quiet investigation had turned up something darker. The HOA board hadn't just tolerated Karen's behavior, they'd quietly enabled it. Brielle came forward again, this time with internal emails. Archived messages between Karen and 2 board members, Marvin Lowe and Trisha Kemp, dated months back. In one, Karen wrote, I've handled the Delcroft issue. No barking since last week. Another simply read, this Malone guy's going to be trouble. If the feds sniff around, keep my name out of anything dated after June. Marvin and Trisha had both recently resigned for personal reasons. But now, they weren't just ex-board members. They were targets in a federal probe. The trial was scheduled in municipal court with state observers present. Karen, clearly worn down but still defiant, arrived in a sharp gray blazer and dark sunglasses. She refused to make eye contact with Derek, but her new attorney, older, more polished, nodded respectfully in his direction. Derek took his seat beside Voss and Christine Jensen. Max stayed home, but not out of sight. A framed photo of him, alert and resting, sat beside Derek on the witness table. It wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. Derek was the first to testify. He walked the court through each moment, from the citations, to Max's poisoning, to the trail cams, the UV evidence, and finally the garage search. The jurors, mostly homeowners themselves, listened with wide eyes and clenched jaws. Then came Christine. Her voice trembled when she spoke of Tucker. People think pets are property, she said softly, but they're family. And when someone like Karen decides they know better, they don't just hurt the animal, they hurt every person who loves them. Karen's lawyer objected, but the judge let her finish. And then came the twist. Voss had brought a new piece of evidence to court. The chemical analysis from the Blue Mouse toy. Traces of a rare, slow-acting neurotoxin used in rodent control, not legally available to homeowners. The sample matched a compound found in the bottles in Karen's garage. Even Karen's attorney shifted in his seat. Where would your client have acquired this substance? The judge asked. Karen broke her silence for the first time. I was advised, she said through clenched teeth, by someone who works with HOA compliance statewide. He said, He said there were options to handle the problem discreetly. The room froze. Derek's mind raced. HOA compliance statewide. That wasn't just board-level mischief. That suggested outside influence. Maybe from someone who'd been feeding Karen advice and chemicals from the shadows? The judge leaned forward. Name, who advised you? Karen bit her lip. I don't know his full name. He always signed as RT. Said he handled enforcement in tougher districts. Voss jotted it down immediately. After closing arguments, the court recessed. Karen's sentence was postponed pending a deeper probe, but Derek knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about one woman with a grudge anymore. It was about a network, a web of silent, self-proclaimed enforcers hiding behind HOA laws and using them to crush anyone who didn't comply. That night, Derek found another envelope. Inside was a business card, no name, just the letters. RT, and on the back, you made a mistake coming after her. You'll regret what's next. The card was heavy, textured, clearly expensive. The front bore just 2 initials, RT, on the back. The message was handwritten in ink that bled slightly into the fibers. You made a mistake coming after her. You'll regret what's next. Derek set it down like it was made of glass. Agent Voss returned that evening. When he saw the card, his jaw tightened. RT, he muttered. We've seen that signature before. He pops up in HOA, disputes that get quietly resolved. Neighborhoods where complaints disappear, owners move, pets vanish. Derek nodded grimly. So Karen wasn't the storm, she was the lightning rod. The real storm was this man or grew behind her. Voss got the green light for a deeper search. Within 48 hours. A federal cybercrime team traced metadata from Karen's laptop, which had been seized during the arrest. Hidden in an encrypted folder labeled HOA templates was an email string between Karen and a burner, domain-r.t.enforce@eagle-policy.org. Derek, read each one. Handle quietly. Enforcement should appear organic. Targets emotional. Stability as vulnerably as public pressure. File a nuisance complaint before board meeting. If ignored, initiate psychological campaign. Pets are easiest leverage. Chilling, robotic, efficient. Voss pulled up a cross-check of the burner. Domain and froze. Eagle Policy wasn't just a made-up address. It was a registered consulting group in Arizona listed under an LLC that handled community order strategies. On paper, they were consultants for HOAs across multiple states. In practice, they were enablers, enforcement for hire, with plausible deniability. And now, they were exposed. Derek had seen enough quiet takedowns to know that going through the system would take months, maybe years. Too many walls. Too many ways for the people behind this to slide away untouched. So he did something faster. He went public. With the help of Brielle and Christine, Derek organized a live-streamed community meeting, not just for Bell Ridge Oaks, but for any neighborhood in the region. Flyers went out. So did emails. He didn't name names. He let the evidence speak. They booked the town hall auditorium. It was standing room only. Derek stepped on stage with calm authority and a manila folder in hand. He told the story not just of Max, or Karen, or Tucker, but of how HOA power could be twisted when left unchecked. He showed the UV footage, the child delivery, the locked cabinet of collars, the email trail from RT. He didn't accuse all HOS. He accused the silence. After the stream ended, the fallout was immediate. Dozens of emails poured in, viewers from other states, other neighborhoods, similar stories. Dogs poisoned. HOA leaders acting like sheriffs. Strange consultants who disappeared when questioned. And the best part? Someone inside Eagle Policy leaked a spreadsheet. Names, clients, payments. And right at the top of Bell Ridge Oaks. Karen Elbridge, Priority Enforcement Package, $3,200. The moment the leak hit local news, Voss got his green light. Federal subpoenas followed. Eagle Policy's offices were raided. Laptops, hard drives, phone records all seized. The initials RT were traced to Ruben Talcott, a former civil enforcement advisor who'd reinvented himself as a consultant for hire. He operated from a luxury estate outside Phoenix. By week's end, he was arrested trying to board a private plane out of Nevada back in Bell Ridge Oaks. Peace returned slowly. Karen was convicted and sentenced to community service and probation with a federal charge pending tied to the Talcott investigation. The HOA board was dissolved. A new one elected, this time by open vote. Brielle was elected president unanimously. The neighborhood's new charter banned private enforcement vendors permanently, and Max Day recovered fully. The little orange cat now spent his afternoons lounging in the sun, perched proudly beside a new iron plaque in Derek's yard. In memory of those silenced and in honor of those who spoke, neighbors passed it every day. Some waved, some stopped and stared, but all of them remembered. 3 months later, Derek received a thin envelope in the mail, no return address. Inside was a single photo. It was of Max, sleeping in the grass, taken from above, not by a camera he recognized, and, underneath a note, "We weren't the only ones watching. Keep your eyes open, Malone." The system may have fallen, but someone else was always lurking beyond it. And as Derek learns, not every HOA enemy wears a name tag.